Where do you get your words? How to build a word bank that students actually use. When I'm presenting on vocabulary instruction or on word love, one of the most common questions I get is, how do you come up with which words to teach? Most often, this question is asked out of genuine curiosity. It's a fair question. After all, who am I to be selecting words on anyone's behalf and encouraging anyone to teach them? The answer is simple. Somebody has to choose the words, and somebody has to put those words into a coherent, easy to teach curriculum so that students can transfer them into their writing and speaking. So while I don't think that I, Mike Ochs, am personally important to the final selection and delivery of vocabulary words, I do think my process is. Put simply, I start with my gut, I move to my brain, and then to the community. In other words, I begin with intuition, move to analysis, and finally to consensus. Research informs each step. My first step in selecting vocabulary words for a single word love unit is to rely on my common sense and intuition. If I'm selecting Tier 2 vocabulary words useful across domains, or academic vocabulary words, school-oriented words that appear across subjects, I start by reading grade-level texts that students will encounter, read-alouds, independent reading materials, curriculum passages, released testing items, and I ask myself, when it comes to this word and this grade level, am I generally hearing students use this word in their talk or seeing it in their writing? I rely on experience and judgment. If the answer to my question is yes, more or less, I move on. If the answer is no, more or less, the word becomes a candidate. It doesn't mean it will make the final cut, but it has made it past the first round. If the text I'm drawing from doesn't contain much robust vocabulary, I reread it and look for vocabulary that exists within the ideas of the text, even if it isn't printed on the page. This comes up often in K2. Many texts at those grade levels contain strong vocabulary and some do not, but the ideas they present or the synonyms for the words used can serve as strong candidates. For instance, I might read a text about a girl who wants to become an astronaut but faces challenges along the way. The text itself may not contain the word setback, but it might be a strong candidate. I add it to my list if the text itself doesn't provide enough robust printed vocabulary. This approach aligns with Beck, McKeown, and Kuchen's guidance in bringing words to life. For Tier 3 words, which are specific to particular domains such as integer, hypothesis, and constitution, I follow the guidance of Robert Marzano and Deborah Pickering. I sort possible words into 3 categories: interesting, important, and essential to understanding the content. I teach explicitly from the essential group. At this stage, I often have dozens of candidate words. Once I have that list, I begin to pare it down using analysis. I draw on the work of Michael Graves and his list of the 4,000 most common words students encounter in school. Many of those words are not useful for direct instruction. Words like the, is, and said are already in regular use, but the list helps ensure that I'm not selecting rare or obscure words. I want vocabulary lists made up of words that are common but underused. This is about transfer. Teaching vocabulary is about knowing words well enough to use them in speech and writing. This is the difference between receptive and expressive vocabulary. When students see a word bank, they often recognize the words. When asked to define them, give examples, or use them in a sentence, they struggle. They'll mumble, stagger, and talk in circles. That gap between recognition and usage reveals shallow word knowledge. So if a candidate word appears on the 4,000 word list, I raise its priority. If a candidate word does not appear on the list, I lower it. By now, I have narrowed my candidate word list to a few dozen words. Although I begin with my own judgment and make the final call, I bring in others to refine the list further. I reach out to my community, often my newsletter subscribers, which number around 5,000, and sometimes to a broader audience. I ask them to rank and sort words through a simple form. Some words I expect to perform well do. Other words do not get rated as highly as I would like. Some words that I overlooked rise quickly. When there's a difference between my preference and the group's ranking, I defer to the group. That's the process. And now I need your help. I'm developing a K2 word love math vocabulary curriculum and would value your input. If you teach or support grades K2, will you take a moment to help rank and sort these words? I take the feedback seriously, and it plays a real role in shaping what gets taught.